In a world where verbal battles have become commonplace and triumph in argument is elevated to the rank of intellectual achievement, a legitimate question arises. Is arguing really a sign of strength, or does it conceal something deeper, perhaps even weakness? In seeking an answer to this question, we turn to the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher whose thoughts stir the mind and force us to rethink established notions. Nietzsche suggests viewing argument as a refuge for those who lack true strength. He argues that genuine strength lies not in the ability to win discussions, but in the ability to stand firm in one's beliefs, even when surrounded by silence. The philosopher believes that people who constantly engage in arguments often try to compensate for a lack of inner confidence and clarity. To delve into the essence of this idea, it is necessary to understand how Nietzsche perceived human nature and the dynamics of power. His philosophy challenges conventional norms, and his view of arguments is no exception. Prepare for your perceptions of conflict and human relationships to be radically altered. The age-old question: what motivates us when we engage in an argument? A desire to defend our righteousness, a thirst for power over minds, or a deep need to protect our ego from encroachment? Friedrich Nietzsche, a perceptive philosopher, would argue that the root of most disagreements lies in a vulnerable ego, in an insatiable thirst for self-affirmation, achieved by subjugating others or their unconditional agreement. According to the thinker, such behavior is a sure sign of weakness of spirit. For strong individuals do not need external approval. They are self-sufficient in their truth and unshakable in the face of disagreement. In his immortal work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche introduced the concept of the Übermensch, Superman, to the world, an individual who has risen above conventional moral norms and lives in harmony with himself. The Superman will not waste time on meaningless arguments. The reason is simple. His gaze is directed towards self-improvement, not toward proving his significance to others. The philosopher believed that those who tirelessly engage in polemics are mired in a state that he called ressentiment, reactive energy, when a person defines himself through opposition to others, rather than through the prism of his own values. Such a reactive lifestyle, in its essence, is a manifestation of weakness, since it involves transferring control over one's emotions and self-identification into the hands of external forces. Recalling recent discussions, it is worth pondering whether their essence lay in the issue being discussed, or whether deeper emotional motives were behind it. Perhaps it was a desire to demonstrate one's intellect, righteousness, or significance. Friedrich Nietzsche argued that the true strength of a personality is manifested in the ability to recognize and control these impulses. Instead of succumbing to an instinctive reaction, a strong person prefers to reflect and analyze the situation. Instead of engaging in an argument, he rises above it, striving for a deeper understanding. However, this does not mean that Nietzsche called for passivity or silence in the face of injustice. On the contrary, he placed actions above words, believing that true strength lies in demonstrating one's values through actions and life choices, not through empty talk. Truly strong people have no need to convince others of their righteousness, since they embody their beliefs in life. They realize that arguments rarely lead to a change of opinion, but more often only strengthen existing positions. Nietzsche wrote that an individual always has to fight for his individuality in order not to be suppressed by society. This path may be associated with loneliness and fear, but according to the philosopher, self-possession is worth any sacrifice. In an era of pervasive social networks, where every disagreement can instantly escalate into a grand conflict, the idea proposed by Nietzsche takes on particular relevance. The philosopher urges us to think about the motives that prompt us to engage in arguments, and to assess whether it is worth spending energy on polemics, or whether we are simply succumbing to external pressure and expectations. Instead of wasting energy on destructive conflicts, Nietzsche suggests focusing on strengthening inner strength. But what is meant by inner strength? According to the philosopher, the starting point is deep self-knowledge. Nietzsche argued that most people do not have a complete understanding of their true motives, fears, and desires. In the absence of such awareness, a person becomes vulnerable to external influences, easily succumbs to provocations and manipulations. Inner strength, on the contrary, grows out of a deep understanding of oneself, giving the ability to maintain resilience and steadfastness despite the surrounding chaos. Nietzsche's criticism is also directed at the very concept of truth. He believed that absolute truth is nothing more than an illusion, a construct created by the human mind to organize the world. If truth is subjective, what's the point of wasting time and energy arguing about it? Nietzsche believed it was far more important to seek personal truth, to explore one's own values, beliefs, and goals, rather than blindly following accepted norms or seeking confirmation of one's own righteousness in endless disputes. This concept seems both liberating and challenging. It calls on us to abandon the pursuit of constant righteousness, to accept the inevitability of uncertainty, and to direct all efforts toward deep self-knowledge. Nietzsche's philosophical reflections push us to ask an important question. Who am I? Beyond my beliefs and arguments, what values do I stand for and how do I live? In accordance with my true beliefs or merely following the expectations of others? In conclusion to this section, it's worth pondering the following. The next time you feel the urge to argue, pause and think. Ask yourself if this is an opportunity to feed your ego or a chance for personal growth. Nietzsche's wisdom suggests viewing disputes not as battles to be won, but as mirrors reflecting our inner state. The question is, what will you see when you look into that mirror? Let's continue our exploration by turning to Nietzsche's profound understanding of the dynamics of power and its influence on human behavior. At the heart of his philosophy lies the concept of the will to power. Nietzsche saw it as the fundamental driving force behind all human actions, as a striving not only for survival, but also for prosperity, development, and self-assertion in the world around us. However, in his opinion, true power lies not in controlling others, but in controlling oneself. This fundamental distinction plays a paramount role in understanding the deep motives behind human disputes. Often, verbal battles flare up out of a mistaken desire for dominance, out of a desire to subordinate another's point of view to one's own will. However, as Nietzsche astutely noted, this behavior often hides inner emptiness, a lack of self-confidence, a lack of clear direction and life goals. People engage in polemics not out of strength, but out of a feeling of vulnerability, inferiority, and instability of their position. As a striking illustration of this idea, the philosopher often criticized the so-called herd instinct. By herd, he meant those who blindly follow accepted norms and seek confirmation of their own righteousness in collective agreement. Such people stir up disputes to strengthen their position in the group, demonstrate loyalty to common beliefs, or silence the voices of dissenters who disrupt their comfort zone. Nietzsche saw this as a manifestation of weakness. A truly strong personality, a Superman, does not need the support of the herd. He lives guided by his own values, even if they go against accepted norms. In everyday life, this phenomenon appears before us in all its glory, especially in the virtual space, where countless battles rage in the comments. Often, online discussions degenerate into personal attacks and an endless cycle of counter-arguments, which ultimately leads neither to constructive dialogue nor to the search for truth. Such squabbles only expose the deeply hidden complexes of the participants, an acute need for recognition of one's own righteousness, a desire to rise above the opponent, or a banal escape from vulnerability in light of Nietzsche's philosophy. Such moments should be seen as a distraction, diverting from genuine work on oneself and the development of self-control. How do we break this vicious cycle? Nietzsche insisted on a radical reorientation from external approval to internal progress. Instead of expending energy trying to convince others, one should direct it toward forming a more complete and strong personality. This path requires considerable courage, the courage to face one's fears, to admit shortcomings, and to accept the inevitable discomfort that accompanies change. No less important is humility, a willingness to admit that truth is not your monopoly, and that your point of view is just one of many. it is necessary to clarify the understanding of Friedrich Nietzsche's views. The philosopher was not a supporter of hermitage or evasion of social life. In his opinion, constructive relationships and intellectual discussions play an important role in the development of personality. However, such interactions should be based on principles of mutual respect and the pursuit of fundamental truths, and not on the desire to rise above others or diminish their dignity. When communication is based on genuine interest and openness, rather than a desire to defend one's own position, a favorable ground is created for establishing genuine connection and mutual understanding. In light of this, a natural question arises. If polemics often indicate weakness, what constitutes the manifestation of true strength in the face of disagreement? For Nietzsche, the goal is not simply winning an argument, but rather transcending it. Strong individuals are capable of listening, impartially considering alternative viewpoints, engaging with ideas rather than personal ambitions, and remaining true to their convictions even when confronted with criticism. They do not shy away from complex discussions, but they also do not feel the need to assert themselves through confrontation. Consider a specific example. Imagine a situation in which someone questions your beliefs or criticizes your actions. A natural reaction might be to defend yourself or prove your rightness. However, what would happen if you paused and reflected instead? What if you used that moment to analyze your own assumptions, ask yourself if there's any truth in the criticism, or simply ignore the comment without feeling the need to respond? This is not a sign of passivity, but a demonstration of strength of character and self-control. Such an approach demonstrates that you are not easily thrown off balance by external influences, and that your self-esteem does not depend on the opinions of others. Nietzsche's philosophical views have a significant impact on our understanding and resolution of conflict situations. Instead of viewing disagreements as battlefields where one must prevail, they can be seen as valuable opportunities for personal growth and development, both for oneself and for others. This shift in perspective has the power to transform not only interpersonal relationships, but also broader social and cultural dynamics. By prioritizing understanding over egotistical ambitions, we create a fertile ground for constructive dialogue aimed at building rather than destroying. Furthermore, it is worth taking the time to reflect on how these ideas relate to each individual's personal experiences. Have there been situations where an argument turned into a struggle to prove one's own rightness rather than a search for truth? What revelations did this experience bring about regarding personal doubts and desires? And how might life change if one were to follow Nietzsche's philosophy in such situations? The appeal of Nietzsche's teachings lies in their enduring relevance. Even in today's rapidly changing and interconnected world, his call for self-control and authenticity remains as powerful as ever. He encourages us to step back from the hustle and bustle, examine our motives, and embrace the challenge of living in accordance with our deepest values. However, this is only a superficial introduction to Nietzsche's philosophy. It offers an even deeper understanding of the nature of human interaction, the dynamics of power, and the pursuit of a meaningful life. In the future, we will consider how his ideas can help not only cope with conflicts, but also successfully overcome them, leading to a greater sense of purpose and fulfillment. To fully grasp the Nietzschean perspective on the futility of discussions, it is necessary to delve into the essence of his concept of self-overcoming, a fundamental principle of his philosophy that permeates all of his work. According to Nietzsche, being is not a static given, but a continuous process of development, testing, and metamorphosis. Power, according to his views, stems from the ability to overcome not only external obstacles, but also internal shackles, fears, doubts, and the ego's insatiable thirst for validation. By engaging in polemics, especially fueled by egotistical motives, we often lose sight of this higher goal. The energy wasted in futile attempts to prove one's point would be wiser to direct towards self-improvement, understanding others' views, or honing one's own beliefs. Nietzsche's writings serve as a reminder that the most momentous battles unfold not in verbal battles, but in the depths of our inner world. One of Nietzsche's most stirring ideas is his critique of morality, which he presents as a tool of the weak. He argued that traditional moral principles often stem from ressentimenta, a deep-seated resentment of the strong by those who feel powerless. This resentment gives rise to the creation of moral frameworks that prioritize meekness, submission, and conformity, rather than strength of character, ambition, and individuality. In this context, disputes can be seen as a continuation of this dynamic, as an attempt by the weak to impose their values on others rather than rising above their own limitations. In this regard, a pressing question arises. How is it possible to build interaction with others while avoiding the shackles of fruitless squabbles? Friedrich Nietzsche might suggest seeking the answer in the high art of dialogue. Unlike disputes, which are characterized by a spirit of competition and a desire for unconditional victory, dialogues are built on the principles of cooperation and aimed at achieving mutual understanding. In a dialogue, both parties approach the discussion with an open heart and a sincere desire to enrich their experience. They do not seek to assert their own superiority, but jointly explore different points of view. Consider, for example, a situation where two close friends disagree on deeply rooted beliefs. In the heat of an argument, each will fiercely defend their position, refusing to compromise, which will only increase tension in the relationship. However, within the framework of a dialogue, they could ask each other questions, share personal experiences, and look for common ground. The result of such an approach would be not only a deeper understanding of each other, but also personal growth for each participant. Nietzsche's dislike of disputes is not a call to avoid all conflicts. Conflict, if approached constructively, can be a powerful stimulus for development. The philosopher urges us to rise above the level of meaningless squabbles and focus on what really matters, striving for perfection, authenticity, and a life lived in accordance with our own principles. This requires a radical change of thinking, a rejection of perceiving other people as adversaries, and recognition of them as fellow travelers on a shared life journey. Consider the philosophical concept of eternal recurrence, proposed by Friedrich Nietzsche. This thinker suggests imagining that each of us is doomed to live our lives over and over again, in the smallest detail and without change. Such a thought experiment necessitates a critical assessment of one's own decisions and life principles. Think about whether you are willing to spend eternity mired in meaningless conflicts, or would you prefer to devote your precious time to more meaningful accomplishments? This idea has enormous potential for personal transformation. It serves as a reminder that time is a priceless gift, and every minute spent on empty arguments is a missed opportunity for self-realization. Instead of wasting energy on fruitless quarrels, it is more celesso to direct it towards creativity, acquiring new knowledge, and strengthening relationships with others. Nietzsche's philosophy also calls for a rethinking of the relationship to truth. His famous statement, "There are no facts, only interpretations," does not deny the existence of truth as such. It only emphasizes that truth is always subjective and shaped by personal perspective. In the heat of an argument, we often mistakenly believe that our point of view is the only correct one, rejecting all others as false or misleading. Nietzsche urges us to accept the multifaceted nature of truth and recognize the right to existence of different points of view. Such a paradigm shift can fundamentally change the approach to disagreements. Instead of perceiving them as a threat to one's own worldview, they should be seen as a stimulus for expanding horizons of knowledge. It is necessary to learn to listen without taking a defensive position, ask questions with genuine interest, and learn without fear. However, Nietzsche's philosophical reflections penetrate to the very essence of human existence, calling for self-improvement as a continuous process. This is not just about overcoming disagreements, but a constant striving for personal growth, for going beyond existing limitations. It is about freeing oneself from the shackles of fear, doubt, and selfishness that bind potential, and about embracing the courage to live in accordance with one's true beliefs. In the context of this topic, it is worth paying attention to the power hidden in silence, especially in the face of conflict. Nietzsche argued that silence can be a manifestation of inner strength, a conscious refusal to participate in meaningless disputes. This is not a passive silence of submission, but a confident silence of a person who knows their worth and does not need constant confirmation. The next time the desire arises to enter into an argument, it is worth pausing and asking yourself, what am I trying to achieve? Is this moment an opportunity for personal growth, or is it just a reaction to the demands of the ego? Nietzsche's philosophy calls for choosing the path of strength, wisdom, and self-overcoming, even if it seems more difficult. In conclusion, Nietzsche's philosophy offers not only a critical analysis of disputes, but also a kind of roadmap for a life filled with meaning and satisfaction. The discoveries made in the process of studying his ideas can radically change not only the interaction with others, but also the perception of oneself in this world. In the culminating moment of the Nietzschean view of polemics, a profound insight emerges before us. True strength lies not in suppressing opponents, but in the art of self-mastery. This mastery goes far beyond simply avoiding arguments. It implies a life permeated by inner clarity, purposefulness, and unwavering resilience. Nietzsche argued that true strength manifests in silence, composure, and the ability to rise above the mundane bustle. To fully grasp this thought, let's turn to the Nietzschean concept of the Übermensch, the pinnacle of human potential. An individual who has transcended societal prejudices, overcome personal limitations, and embraced life in all its diversity and complexity. For Nietzsche, the Übermensch does not engage in pointless arguments because they have no need to. Their life is their main argument. Their actions, beliefs, and achievements speak louder than any words. In the modern world, this idea may seem paradoxical. We live in an age of continuous communication, where opinions are exchanged, hotly debated, and carefully analyzed with incredible speed. Social networks, news platforms, and public discussions often prioritize quantity over quality, creating the illusion that loudness equals strength. However, Nietzsche's philosophy calls on us to step away from this chaos and focus on what really matters, our own path of self-discovery and personal growth. How can we integrate Friedrich Nietzsche's profound ideas into the fabric of our daily lives? First of all, we must realize that not every disagreement deserves our active participation. When faced with a potential conflict or dispute, it is worth asking ourselves, is this discussion really worth the energy spent? How does participating in these debates align with my personal values and long-term goals? Or does it merely distract from more important tasks? Nietzsche argued that the ability to choose the appropriate time and manner to engage in an argument is a sign of inner strength and self-control. It demonstrates that we are not puppets of our own impulses, but rather masters of our actions and decisions. Secondly, it is advisable to approach disagreements from a position of curiosity and openness, rather than from a defensive or aggressive stance. Instead of trying to prove our point at all costs, we can try to sincerely understand the other person's point of view. This does not mean abandoning our own beliefs, but merely expressing a willingness to allow for the possibility that we may learn something new or see the world from a different angle. Nietzsche highly valued intellectual courage, that is, the willingness to question even our own seemingly unshakable assumptions and to accept the complexity and multifaceted nature of the world. Thirdly, it is important to focus on embodying our values in life, rather than on endless arguments about them. This means living in such a way that our actions and deeds reflect what we sincerely stand for, even when faced with opposition or criticism. Nietzsche believed that authenticity and sincerity are much stronger than any, even the most convincing rhetoric. When we live in accordance with our principles, we inspire others not so much with words as with personal example, which has a much greater impact on others. Returning to the broader panorama of Nietzschean philosophy, it is worth noting that at its very core, it calls on us to meet the vicissitudes and unpredictability of existence with courage and creative impulse. Nietzsche saw life not as a puzzle waiting to be solved, but rather as a blank slate on which everyone is free to inscribe their own meaning. In this context, polemics and discord appear only as an annoying distraction from the real work of life, the painstaking process of becoming who we are destined to be. One of the most iconic concepts proposed by Nietzsche is the idea of amor fati, which translates to love of fate. It consists of unconditionally accepting everything that comes our way, both joyful moments and sorrowful losses, both triumphs and defeats, viewing them as integral elements of our life path. Adopting such a worldview allows us to approach conflict situations with unperturbed calmness. Instead of seeing disagreements as obstacles in the way, we can perceive them as a stimulus for personal growth, enrichment with knowledge, and strengthening of the spirit. And here we come to perhaps the most valuable lesson. Strength lies not in avoiding conflicts, but in knowing how to transform them. When we enter into disagreements armed with wisdom, humility, and a desire for self-improvement, we gain the opportunity to turn even the most difficult interactions into moments of transformation. We can rise above the petty pursuit of victory and focus on what really matters, building strong relationships, deepening mutual understanding, and living an authentic, fulfilling life. In concluding our exploration of Nietzsche's philosophical labyrinths, let us pause for reflection. The profound truths he reveals and his polemical style, as he himself understood it, are often perceived as a manifestation of weakness. The issue is not that the pursuit of argument is reprehensible in itself, but that it distracts us from a more significant goal: self-improvement. True strength lies not in seeking to elevate oneself above others, but in the ability to master oneself. It manifests in the courage to live according to one's principles, in the humility that allows one to question one's own beliefs, and in the wisdom necessary to concentrate on what truly matters. Therefore, the next time the desire to engage in an argument arises, it is worth pausing and reflecting on these words. Ask yourself, what do I seek to achieve? What does this moment say about my own insecurities or hidden desires? And how can I use this experience for personal growth, learning, and becoming a stronger and more authentic version of myself? Ultimately, the essence of this philosophy is not about avoiding conflict, but about being able to overcome it. It is a call to rise above the vanity, to meet life's challenges with courage and a creative approach, to live in a way that reflects our highest potential. It is a call to each individual to become the architect of their own life, the creator of their personal destiny, and the sovereign master of their fate. Perhaps this is the key lesson that existence offers us. The most compelling argument in our favor is not the words we speak, but the life path we consciously choose.